Action!
Action! Welcome to SharePoint Dev Weekly. This is episode 39, and it is 13th of May, 2019. It is springtime. There's no snow anymore in Helsinki, which is good.
No, there's also no snow in here.
That's probably a good sign. Yeah. It was actually really awesome weather. I was last week in Microsoft Build in Seattle, and it hit like, what was it, 75, 80s, which is like 25 Celsius, which is pretty decent.
Nice.
It actually gets too hot even. But hey, it is what it is. So, like mentioned, it's been actually 1.5 weeks since we recorded last time.
Yeah.
It was a build week.
Yes, exactly. So
what have you done? You were not in build.
Well, yes, I wasn't. Well, so somebody had to hold the fort while you were
that's true.
The booth bay. But
I did notice that you guys, or there was a lot of contributions on the CLI side of things as well.
Oh, so it's twofold, right? On one, so like my head is not split between two things at CLI. One is just
split your head. Don't split your head.
Well,
sounds fair.
I'd love to, but it's still it feels like that at times because like on one hand we had the regular additions, fixes to bugs, if any. So that is going on, and then on the other hand, we're going through a major refactoring of CLI in two big areas. One is the auth, and the other one is like over time as commands were added. We not always paid as much attention as we'd like to keep the names and options consistent across names. Yeah. So and sometimes we lose an ID or list ID for the same thing. So we're not going through the things that we're going to break things because we want to have the V2. So this is now the chance for us to align the names across the board. Yeah. But the first thing is auth, and that's actually like the one thing that we wanted to do initially from the start with CLI is that give you the ability to sign into different workload with different accounts. So you could sign in to Graph with one account and then with another one to SPO. Well, it sounded like a good idea at first, but then in the end, when you think about it, like, maybe it's not really what people need. So now we're going through the hoops of, you know what, let's have people authenticate once, and then they can just call out to Teams to flow to SPO, whatever, like,
potentially more sense, yeah.
Yeah, true. Without having to re-authenticate, right? Because the whole auth process is typically interactive.
Yeah.
So when I go through that, but like we have roughly around 300 commands. So every single change, and then for each one we have tests.
Yep.
So tests are a blessing and a curse. Like it's really great to have them because the moment you change something, when you break something, the test will show that immediately.
Yep.
But then when you change something, the test will break, show that immediately, and then you have to revamp them. So you're doing basically the same work twice, and then at some point you think you've adjusted all of them, and you run something. Oh yeah, for this change to work correctly, we also need to change that, and then you go through 300 files again to change all of them.
But isn't that the whole point of having those tests?
Exactly.
You are able to validate things. So
yes, but at times when you are in, like, you cannot really get yourself in the mode of I just want to get things done. Because it requires patience. You just have to go. You need to churn through all of them and get them done, get them up to par, and then like finally, like auth is for one such a core piece of the whole. Like when you change anything about it, everything's affected.
Yep.
So like the moment I change one thing, we would have like 1,200 errors in tests.
Yeah.
And then basically you cannot see like what is truly affected and what is the effect of the tests being affected by the change. So you first need to fix all of them, and then you can see, okay, so there are 30 things that I need to address.
Luckily, the auth doesn't get changed that often, right? So because that's the fundamental part of things. So
yes, and so nothing has changed from the AAD point of view, right? That part is the same. It's just us in CLI who thought that it would make more sense to unify that and offer you one way to authenticate in CLI and not really authenticate against AAD or Graph or SPO.
Yep.
Right. So it's like the consequence of our deliberate choice from the back then that we learned over time, and now we want to adjust, and now we have to basically pay the price. But it's an interesting thing. I think the CLI. So we've worked on CLI for I think a year and a half now, and I think that's the biggest project that I've worked on at that scale.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see like how things look at scale, how things change over time, and and also from the open source point of view, like different people write code differently, and kind of the CLI team are the gatekeepers to try to keep things consistent, because like the person who's going to add to that might be somebody else again, right? So
Sure.
we try to make things look and feel the same across the code base.
Sure.
So that's
Which
also
means that you need to have a code guidance, right? On the
Yes.
You should have written down code guidance. If you don't, and all of that in this scale, what you're actually coordinating stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's like 20, 30 contributors, 40 already in the.
I think around 40 of the top of my head, and we have around 300 commands. So there's quite some code. I don't even know how many lines of code we have, but it's a lot.
Yep, absolutely. Cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. Kind of related on that one. There's maybe I want to give once again those things. Should I even say this out loud? But maybe I should. And let's have an open discussion and transparent discussion on things. I had an interesting meeting last Thursday. So I was in Build last week, and obviously we'll talk about Build in a second. And Build was kind of cool. Well, it's always cool, but it's more for non-office staff, so not really for SharePoint, to be honest. But there was quite a few people in the sessions and all of that. But now I had a meeting on Thursday, related on the future of the SharePoint Online PowerShell and the PnP PowerShell, because that's related on the CLI as well. Mm-hmm. And obviously I'm not promising anything, and this is highly speculative, but I'm not want to promise anything, but I'm highly interested in any feedback around this discussion. Was that what if in the future we would, first of all, it's highly confusing that we have SharePoint Online PowerShell and then we have PnP PowerShell, which actually has more features. With PnP PowerShell, you can authenticate using app only, but SharePoint Online you can't. And if you have a multi-factor authentication, that's a massive problem, because then can schedule running scripts and all of that stuff. So obviously we want to solve this as part of this transition to the future. And one of the things what we're right now thinking is that potentially as part of the core transition, so whenever we get CSM core, we get PowerShell core, we actually, this is the interesting part, drop SharePoint Online PowerShell completely. Oh my God, what? No. But the whole point being on the fact that the engineering would concentrate on the APIs. And then the community and open source community as CLI and PnP PowerShell would basically concentrate then together on building the command line interfaces on top of those well-documented APIs, in the admin UI APIs and then the content APIs. How would that make sense?
Well, it would make a lot of sense. Like if you ask me, I'd like to see the world where basically the same thing in Azure, there is CLI and PowerShell. And to me, I would take it even a step further, that I wouldn't say it's not SPO or PnP PowerShell. It's Office 365 CLI or Microsoft 365 CLI, Microsoft 365 PowerShell. And PnP is just, by coincidence, the audience that contributes and owns the code base at the time.
Sure.
So that's it's not. It's not PnP.
I would call it PnP PowerShell.
Yes.
So obviously at this point, what we're looking to do is make an official statement from an engineering side where the PowerShell commandlets or the commandlets and the command line will be provided by the open source community, which we will support. And then that will not be called PnP PowerShell; it will be called something else, more kind of a what's the right term? The bigger scale of PowerShell. So sure, there will be the separate Teams PowerShell. There will be, at least for now, and there's multiples. There's Skype PowerShell. There's Exchange PowerShell. But right now, then this change would then mean that we would basically stop releasing a separate SharePoint Online PowerShell command. Let's rather combine that with the PnP, whatever we've been building in PnP, and then still have a separate. It would be two different modules: one module for the tenant admin operations and one module for the content operations.
Why?
Because they have a different permission scheme and different ways of behaving.
But that's how you authenticate. So imagine, right? Me being a user, if you make distinction like that, You expect me to know what's admin and what's the content, and then you will.
You should know where are you connecting to. Are you a tenant administrator and operating at a tenant level, or are you connecting to a site and operating in a site level?
In an ideal world, yes. If I look at the current state of things, some require you to have access to this site, but some require you to connect on this site and documentation. So sure, in ideal world, we have crystal clear API documented that explicitly says in order to perform this operation, you need to have this permission on this level. We are not there yet.
I'm not following, because of course we are there yet. All of the SharePoint Online PowerShell commandlets require that you connect to the tenant admin URL, and they do not work otherwise because they're tenant admin PowerShell commandlets, and they've been designed to be a tenant admin commandlet, PowerShell commandlet.
Fair enough. But that's so there you already have clear distinction. Now we see there's the SPO and PNP. Imagine all of that is gone, right? So in commandlet name there is the verb-SPO action or verb-PNP action. Yeah.
So imagine that right now all of that is gone. All of that is gone.
Exactly.
So, already right now, the PNP has operations which do require you to understand that you're connecting the tenant admin URL versus some of the PowerShells require that you're connecting to the site URL. There's no way for you to know that.
Well, okay. Let me tell you what we are working on CLI, and maybe that will give you another perspective. So in CLI, as I said, you are authenticating to AAD. So the moment you log in, you don't specify a URL at all. You just say O365 login. And then you will get device login prompt. You go to URL, you sign in the device code, you're done.
Yeah.
What we do behind the scenes is that we connect you to Microsoft Graph.
Sure.
So at that point, you only need to have like the basic access to Microsoft Graph. Then
you do actually other things as well, because it's not only Graph which you're
No. But initially, the first. So imagine you've just installed CLI, you don't have anything else on computer.
Yeah.
You log in first time, we get you the access token to the Graph.
Yeah.
Then you run something like get me CDN settings in 365. Well, that is definitely a tenant admin thing, but we're not asking you for a URL internally because you're running that command. That command by itself knows, hey, I am a tenant admin command, so now I'm going to use Graph to retrieve SPO URL from that the tenant admin URL, and I'm trying to obtain a token to that. Yep. If I am a user, not tenant admin, the command will fail.
True.
But it doesn't expect me as a user. And sure, if you open the command help, it will tell you, I command X. In order to run me, you have to have access to the tenant admin site. But it doesn't require the user up front to know things because
Sure. Makes sense. Now you will get an exception then or thrown a mistake the way where you don't have the right permissions. And one way of handling that. Absolutely. Now all of this is still highly speculative. That's why I didn't really want to deep dive on the rat hole, because it doesn't make any sense at this point. I'm more interested on the idea of thinking of going to the direction where we as an engineering would not ship the commandlets anymore. And how would that actually make the community feel? Because then obviously engineering will be supporting, and engineering will be part of the team shipping the open source commandlets, but they're not coming from the current.
There is nothing in your way as team that builds product to contribute new commandlets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I mean, if all of that became open source the same way it is in Azure, why not? Why not just open it up to everybody, keep the API as the focus area, and then everything required or in terms of automating things, may build it in the open with community.
Yep, absolutely. So, and that's precisely the thing what we're interested on, getting feedback from the community, and no promises at this point, no timings, no nothing. Please do not freak out when you're watching the video and saying, oh my God, there are. But nothing has been yet decided. It's just good to get some feedback on the social media and on the different channels on the thinking. Obviously, if we would go there to this direction, we would make sure that everything is documented properly, everything is communicated properly, and it's 100%. Let's say transparent. That it shouldn't have any impact on the customers if it's open source or not. So there will be a support for the open source stuff as well. if we can figure out what that means in practice and all of that. But now .NET
support is
framework and all of that.
maybe a weird word, right? Because support has also the different meaning in SharePoint. But what you actually mean is SLA.
Sure, but
yes,
again, support for the customers on trying to execute the things to their tenant. And if there's any issues, then there's an SLA and there's support available.
Exactly.
With people.
Yes.
You're able to get some support on your questions. So whatever that means in practice. But anyway, that's a kind of a side discussion, but it's good to get feedback on that one. What else? Microsoft Build was last week.
Yes.
How
was it?
It's not a so. We started actually having SharePoint and Office and presence in Microsoft Build only a few years back. So it used to be a .NET and Visual Studio conference, 100%.
And Windows, I think.
And Windows, yes. Now that Windows organization is bundled together with Office 365 organization, it kind of changes the thinking here, and it's interesting to see what will be the future. But it was interesting. Graph obviously has a massive presence in the end-to-end story around the persona way of thinking, and everything in Microsoft is more and more on the user perspective. So concentrating on persona, getting the relevant information as fast as possible. And Microsoft Graph is really on the front and center of that one, which is really good. We had 2 booths. So the OneDrive SharePoint engineering had 2 booths over there related on, actually 3. What kind of 4? It depends again on how to count.
5.
Obviously, there was one in the Microsoft Graph because we own OneDrive SharePoint engineering owns the files and lists and libraries and sites in Graph. So those APIs, so that was manned by our team members and the engineering people. Then we had 2 booths which were more on the overall extensibility, like SharePoint framework and APIs and all of that discussion, kind of extending SharePoint on OneDrive. And then there was the Fabric booth as well. So the Fabric actually belongs in the same organization as I do. So kind of a 4 booths from that perspective. So, but a lot of people dropping by. There was plenty of people on the session. I had a session which was building engaging intelligence portals and solutions with SharePoint framework. Sounds.
I know exactly what you mean. Doing it
yes.
every day, 8 a.m. Building intelligence stuff.
Wow. What it basically means is that the latest on SharePoint framework and what's the relevant stuff over there and how it relates on the modern portals and experiences which we provide through SharePoint or through Microsoft Teams, because it's a combination of both nowadays more and more. So, which is interesting. And then next week, it's kind of an interesting because I know what's going to be announced next week, but then on Build, we were not allowed to talk about certain things. And then next week, we have SharePoint conference coming up starting from, when is it, on weekend? I think the first pre-workshop days are on Sunday, 19th of May. So within 5 days. I think AC Andrew Connell has a pre-workshop on Sunday, and then on Monday we have a pre-day workshop, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the actual SharePoint conference next week. And then week after that we have European Collaboration Summit, right? So this is an endless run of conferences and conferences and conferences and demos and demos and demos. But hey,
it's just it comes and goes in waves, right? There is time when there is not that much going on, and then there is time when conferences are just like week back to back to back to back.
It's the May. I think the May was already last year. It was almost a similar thing. And to be fair, we checked together with you. We checked the SharePoint Saturday situation on now, and the next SharePoint Saturday is on the 1st of June. So everybody is kind of
which is directly after ECS, right?
It is. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, there's all the time something happening, but hey, it is what it is. Cool. Just being conscious about the time as well. So let's actually go to the articles and talk about these things. I'm going to mention a few pointers from here. Tell me when you get the slide.
Yes, it's there. It's there.
It was fast.
Just works.
Cool. It just works. So first of all, this is the Microsoft Teams. This is the build session which I had, where we talk about the latest on SharePoint framework and portals, and then Microsoft Teams integration, and then there was a nice preview, quick demo around Office add-ins development with SharePoint framework, which is planned to go to to preview as part of the 1.9 release. Again, it's planned to go preview in 1.9. It might still delay from there. We'll see when we actually get that one. And 1.9 is right now planned to get released in June. So I'm just looking
on Friday, just not which week.
Yes, not on Friday. You do not ship on Friday.
Okay.
You do not ship
on
Friday.
Tuesday. On Tuesday. On a Tuesday.
Yes, a Tuesday is good. A Tuesday works. Because then if you miss a 1 day or 2 days, it's still fine because it's if you target an a Tuesday. So that's absolutely fine. But don't ship on Friday.
No.
It was a busy week as well. We also released 1.8.2. So that came out last week. Probably the biggest kind of let's say, more notable thing here is the Node.js 10 support, and then it was addressing again certain regressions related on 1.8 or 1.81, which is slightly awkward. So we released the 1.8.1 to address some regressions in 1.8, and then we introduced new regressions in 1.8.1. But hey, it's software development.
Reality, right?
Unfortunately, yes. So this one should be now the final minor version, and then the next one will be 1.9, hopefully. So there was quite a few. I think every issue which we had in the 1.8 is related on the versioning matrix, which changed as part of the 1.8, which made life slightly more difficult. So basically, you can use TypeScript 3.3. You can use React 16.8, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But then if you do that in a certain way, it has implications and blah, blah, blah. So all of that is...
You just have to have like all the stars aligned.
Correct.
You have to have the right version of TypeScript, of React typings, Office UI Fabric. Everything has to be in sync, right? And it's like and that across online, which is the latest, 2019, 2016, yes.
And now we're supporting Node.js 8 and 10, which is interesting as well. So sooner or later, we will drop the Node 8 support because there's no point for us trying to support backward compatible too many versions. So it is now in 10, which is now the default long-term support version of Node.js as well, which is good because finding the 8.x was starting to be difficult already. So because it's not available in the Node.js.
Cool. You just do nvm install v8, you're done.
Sure. Now, Node.js, if you go to the Node.js support, but this one is so you always, right now, it's the LTS version in here is 10.x already. So that kind of drives people to install the 10.x, and then if they run into issues, is it because of the version? If it's not, now it's supported, which is good.
Yes. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Now, what else? What's that one? This one was interesting from last week. Kind of interesting that we did a GA of Microsoft Search in the build timeframe, not in the SPC timeframe, but there will be numerous sessions in the SharePoint conference next week around the Microsoft Search. I think we actually had booth and sessions in build around the Microsoft Search as well, which is now Microsoft Search. It's no longer inside of a SharePoint, or so to say. So it's now like it used to be at some point. It's like going back on the fast search timeframe, right?
Yeah, but this makes perfect sense, right? There's just one search across the clients and all experiences, and in the end, like from the user point of view, I get this because in the end, you don't care whether things are in Outlook or you search for things, whether they're left or right, and then you want the results in place.
I don't want to decide where I go to find my stuff. I want to go to a single location and I want to find my stuff, period. So that should be fine. So really good. So that's out. Right now, there's no extensibility as such for Microsoft Search, but there obviously is plans to support extensibility in the UI, also on the graph side of the things to modify things. I think actually last week, or 1.5 weeks ago, we recorded the SB Dev Weekly with Mikael, and he is actually heading to this team. So he is joining the Microsoft Search team, and Mikael has quite a significant experience on the extensibility of SharePoint. So,
and being an influencer, he can influence this experience as well.
Yes. Well, obviously, it's slightly different internally in Microsoft how things work, but absolutely, that's why
you have influence, just not saying how much. Yeah,
that is so true. Good. What else? We had an interesting discussion earlier today with Jose around the audiences. This one was kind of an interesting reminder of things. So Jose, hopefully pronouncing the name depending on a location where he is located, and talking about real audience targeting functionality for SPFX, and as a workaround, he's using now user profile based property and checking what he's rendering. And just to be clear on this one, so the classic audiences in SharePoint Online, it never really worked. Well, technically it worked, but the audiences
didn't scale.
The audiences were compiled once a week, so it didn't really scale. It wasn't really used in SharePoint Online, and if somebody is wondering why, well, that's historical reasons. So the classic audiences was originally designed for on-premises, not for the scale of SharePoint Online, like I said. Thank you, Waldek, on that. Now, and using then user profile-based checking is absolutely a valid option. So basically, hey, is this user from the office of Helsinki or from Amsterdam? And let me show these news rather than those news based on the data feeds which I'm capable to access in my extensibility. Which makes perfect sense. And that's actually the way I would have implemented things anyway, even though we would have a modern audiences available. Because, and we talked about this one with Waldek as well, because especially if the modern audiences, which has been announced in the April 2019, we had the audiences, let me actually find it in here. Audience targeting is in here. You're able to basically target audiences in audience targeting for the news and highlight content web parts allows news authors and sites and tag news articles in the Azure directory groups and then target those based on the data. So basically, inside of the web part, there's a user profile based, well, in this case, Azure Active Directory based filtering on the news, what you want to actually show, which is technically exactly the same what this, Jose was doing as a workaround. And the problem with the classic audiences was the fact that it worked in a way that you actually filtered the web part. Is the web part visible on a page or not based on the audience? And that was a horrible experience for the content creator or the page creator. Because if you had, for example, 5 or 6 languages or 5 or 6 audiences and different people was meant to be different, different web parts, you actually had all of those in edit mode. You had all of those 6 web parts visible, and you had no way for knowing how the page will look like for a targeted audience, right?
In a way, you will still have the challenge here unless it's solved in a clever way, right? Because you will have a single web part that will show different things depending on who you are. But if you want to preview the page as an audience, you still have to have a way to inject the audience to the page, if you like.
Yep, absolutely. Makes sense. There's a similar kind of a challenge, absolutely. But you won't have 6 or 7 web parts on a page messing up the layout, like it was in the classic SharePoint publishing. So
yeah, well, depending how you architect your internet, right? Because you could still have like one source for this audience versus a source for this, and if the whole source is different, that might require a different web part. But then, so it's like it's challenges that will arise the moment this is shipped, and people will try to implement this in production and will come across scenarios that might have not been envisioned from the start. And then I think that will just evolve over time to address these needs.
Absolutely. And again, that comes down on the classic minimal viable product discussion. So getting something out, getting the feedback, adjusting based on that, on the input of people, and then hopefully eventually hitting the 80-90%, let's say, what is it, 80-90% mark on the business requirements. Yeah. And then the rest 20 or 10% is for extensibility. So that's how it works. But yeah, so classic example, just to pinpoint this, recap this one. So implementing functionalities which are based on the user profile or Azure AD user attributes and changing the behavior is absolutely valid workaround. I think that's a proper design. It's a good design. Somebody might actually argue that do you want to use the user profile property or should be targeting on the Azure AD property? Debatable again, because Azure AD cannot be extended so easily as the user profiles in SharePoint. But then the user profile service doesn't have an APIs to actually create those custom properties and all of that. So it's missing.
Yeah, and then there are also the things like in AD, if you have, I'm not sure if that's related to the premium AD, that if you have that, you can have dynamic groups, which is also an interesting thing. So kind of coming along the audiences without compilation once a week. So there are interesting scenarios around that. And I'm trying to think if, wasn't there something introduced in search, in SharePoint search in 2013 related to audiences as well? Because I vaguely remember
there was some
something
tags.
With that.
There was tags, right? You were able to create search queries based on user profile properties or groups of the person.
I don't know. I vaguely recall something related to that, to audience targeting, but it's just way back. It's I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what happened last week, so it doesn't matter. So
you were at Build.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, actually, it is recorded, so that's kind of convenient. So I can go.
Yes, you can watch back. Yes. Which webcast did I do?
Exactly. Cool. Anyways, this is coming out. Roadmap IT. There's no actually timing on this one. Just out of curiosity, let me actually click and then open up that one in a tab. Do we have a timeline? Q1 calendar year 2019. So it is actually coming. I'm not sure if this is already visible in the news web part. I think it is.
Because we are already in Q2, right?
I think it actually, if I remember correctly, it is visible there. So you can actually kind of have a test it out on how things are looking.
Cool.
Now, moving along on articles, this one was an update from Corey Roth around how to set up as continuous integration, continuous deployment in Azure DevOps with the help of SharePoint Framework Generator. So this one has been updated on May 8th to include. That's probably a year issue. So I'm pretty sure.
No. It was already.
I'm pretty sure that there's a mistake on the year. It's going to be 2020 when we get used to that it's 2019, right? Yes. But that's basically just adjustment of the existing story. I think we went through this one in one of the scenarios already in the past, but basically a really nice blog post explaining how to set up the continuous integration, continuous deployment. There's quite a few of these out there, so you might want to compare to different blog posts and take the best scenario, what's suitable for your solution based on that. And actually, Velin had quite a few video demos which are recorded as demos in the community course as well. So really cool stuff. Now, this one was from Appy. So adding links to Teams in your SharePoint site. So let's see.
So you can have a deep link to calendar, notebook, documents.
To the notebooks and calendar and documents so mapping basically the SharePoint and Teams to work together between each other more efficiently. So, and how the URLs basically are being constructed. And now, technically, somebody might say that unless the URL structure has been documented, there is always the fear for us in Microsoft or somebody from Microsoft changing the URL structure at some point without understanding the impact of that then for existing customers, because the assumption was that nobody would be using them. But something to be aware, unless it is documented, it is not necessarily
an API.
An API, yes, exactly. Good. Sharing dynamic data between web parts from Marco Barbosa, and this is around the dynamic data and how you can share the data between different web parts. And actually,
nice,
cool looking sample.
Yeah. Charts, right? Always good.
Having a dynamic dashboard together with different web parts, and then which are adjusting based on the selection on the one web part. So really cool stuff.
Yep.
And implementing these kind of things is quite actually easy using the reusable controls. And sure, you can use the chart.js as well, but there is also the SharePoint Framework BMP reusable controls, which are actually abstracting the chart.js, so you can even more efficiently use and render data using those controls. That's really cool stuff.
Nice.
And a quite long blog post, one step at a time, also explaining how to make things happen. So really cool stuff from Marco. And then the last one was from Yannick Borkmans, getting started with Redux in SharePoint Framework Part 1. There are quite a few samples on the Redux and SPFX, but it's always good to have, let's say, recapped, and there's a nice charts and explanations on what does it actually mean, and how do we store the state in the using the Redux way for multiple web parts in the one page. So that's basically the whole point of this one. Are you using Redux in your implementations? Well, you don't actually implement customer web parts, but
yes, exactly. So nowadays I'm not doing anything in React now.
Yeah, you're only doing PowerPoint.
If only. I'm doing meetings and demos and interviews.
Yeah.
No, actually, I do develop every day, but that's CLI. So that is that is 100% Node.js and TypeScript.
There we go. There is, by the way, a note that I noticed here. It's part 1 and part 2. Actually, so part 2 probably came out actually on the same day. So this cool set of information around this one, and really good to have this one covered as a repeat thing as well. So, and I know that we have a Redux samples also in SPDevFX web parts repo, so people can check those out.
And again, I guess it's just different take, maybe different way of doing things, and it's always good to have all options, because different people learn in different way, and maybe one way of explaining things is easier for some people than the other. So
absolutely. Cool. Let's close that one, and let's start closing the weekly thingy. Anything meaningful? What are you gonna do? You're not coming in Las Vegas.
I am not. I'm not coming in Vegas.
Why?
Yeah. It's like I think the original plan was that I would be going to Ignite.
Yeah.
But so far I haven't planned anything yet, so maybe I won't be there at all. I don't know. It's just like there's a point in life when things change and some things become more important than others, and like that's the thing,
only
right?
24 hours in a day, so that's the thing.
Exactly, and I mean, like, there was time when I used to drive to work, and it would cost me somewhere between hour and 2 hours every day. And now that I work at home, I value the time even more. Which is like, okay, so if I would be away for a week, because a conference oftentimes is like, the event is like 3 days, but there's pre-conference, post-conference, there's this, there's that, and it quickly becomes a week.
Yep.
And it's a whole week away from family and home and also work. So, and things are not being done by themselves, right? So
True. Absolutely. I do understand that.
And yet you're away. You were away last week. You're going to be away next week, and then the week after that.
It's not the big one, so I need to do the big one. So unfortunately, I've started. I would love to do SharePoint Saturdays. I would love to meet people more, but it's just get to the point where it's getting more difficult to manage all of the things and also deliver the work, because we need to actually deliver the actual work as well. So not just talk. We do other stuff than just these videos as well during the week.
Yeah, and I guess, like, especially in your case, at times it feels to me like you have 3 jobs, right?
But hey, on the other hand, I can't complain, because this is really my dream job. The only way, obviously, I should be learning to adjust slightly on the work amounts, but I can't figure out what else I would love to do. So realities of life.
Yeah.
We'll see where this one will take us, together with the community and together with the BMP team and together with open source people. So one step at a time. I just love being being able to help other people to succeed and being able to share the code and being able to promote whatever people are doing, because I think that's super important as well. There's super smart people out there in the community and in the world who just are waiting to get found. And if we can actually raise the awareness of these people and the community on the stuff that people do, I think that's super valuable. So hey,
cool.
But I think that's it for now. So thank you, Waldek, once again. We'll need to figure out what happens next week when I'm in SharePoint Saturday. SharePoint Saturday. I'm in
SharePoint Saturday SPC.
Where am I next week? I don't know. But we'll figure it out. And the week after that will be in
There will be an episode.
There will be an episode, absolutely. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.